Thank you for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, the arraignment of former President Donald Trump in a Manhattan courtroom. 34 counts are expected to be filed against Trump as legal analysts call the case against him weak. And his attorney says the former president is getting ready for a battle. With anti-Semitism rising, the state of Virginia is taking on crimes against Jews and using education to defeat ignorance.
Best way to fight bad information is with good information.
How you can cut your risk of getting Alzheimer's by avoiding the many things that cause the disease.
You don't have to go down that road toward Alzheimer's. That's the important thing about it.
Fulfilling a biblical calling by ministering to those in prison.
I felt a calling and a prompting on my life to reach those that were in prison. God had just kind of used that as a burning, or to start a burning passion in my heart to really reach the least of these.
And one of the most familiar stories in the Bible is now a movie with a strong opening this weekend at the box office. Those stories for you today on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We begin this half hour with former President Donald Trump set to be charged with 34 felony counts today, according to a leak from the sealed indictment. He plans to turn himself into authorities this afternoon, where he'll be arrested and arraigned, but spared handcuffs and time in a jail cell. CBN News White House correspondent Abigail Robertson is on the story.
Former President Trump waved to supporters as he arrived in New York City on the eve of his arraignment.
He's gearing up for a battle.
Cameras captured his every move from Florida to New York, where he will surrender to authorities this afternoon. The New York judge presiding over the proceedings denied media requests to allow cameras in the courtroom.
We don't know how substantive these charges are. I mean, this case is thought to be the lesser in severity compared to the other investigations that are still ongoing, in which the former president could face indictments.
After a leaked report Monday night claimed Trump will be charged with 34 felony counts for falsification of business records, Trump released a statement on Truth Social calling for District Attorney Alvin Bragg to be indicted. Nathan Gonzalez from Inside Elections tells CBN News Republicans need to wait and see what the charges are before rushing to the former president's defense.
Just because it's a political investigation, or that the investigator, the DA in this case, has a political motives, doesn't mean that President Trump is innocent. He can still be guilty even if it's a political investigation.
Trump becoming the first president or former president to be charged with a crime. It involves alleged hush money payments to an adult film star before the 2016 election. Trump denies her claims of an affair and any wrongdoing. Trump reportedly will not be handcuffed, fingerprinted, or have a mugshot taken. Trump's attorney told ABC News this indictment is unprecedented.
I just don't know what to expect to see. Hopefully, what I hope is that we get in and out of there as quickly as possible, that it's, at the end of the day, a typical arraignment where we stand before the judge, we say not guilty, we set schedules to file motions and whatnot or discovery, and we move forward and get out of there.
Police are setting up barricades and preparing for protests near the downtown Manhattan courthouse where Trump will be arraigned. Mayor Eric Adams issued a pointed message to protesters Monday.
Our message is clear and simple. Control yourselves. New York City is our home, not a playground for your misplaced anger.
Trump's attorneys say he will enter a plea of not guilty. Legal experts warn this court battle could be slow and play out well beyond the 2024 presidential election.
Trump will fly back to Mar-a-Lago after the arraignment set for 2:15 p.m. this afternoon, where he plans to deliver a primetime address responding to the charges. Reporting from the White House, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
A new report shows violent attacks and hateful rhetoric against Jews in the U.S. reached an all-time high last year. Anti-Semitic acts jumping 36% in 2022. That is according to data from the Anti-Defamation League. Some 3,700 incidents were reported across the country. The year also saw a dramatic rise in white supremacist propaganda, along with increases in harassment, vandalism, and physical assaults against Jewish people and places of worship. With crimes against Jews rising, Virginia is the first state to create a task force to investigate these incidents and educate the public on how to prevent anti-Semitism. CBN's Caitlin Burke sat down with Attorney General Jason Miyares to find out what the state is doing to protect the Jewish community.
The Jewish community faces a greater rise in hate than any other religious group in the U.S. With that in mind, officials here in Virginia's capital are taking the lead in growing efforts to fight anti-Semitism.
If you come in and you decide to commit acts of violence or violate anyone's civil rights, you're going to be hearing from the Office of the Attorney General in Virginia very shortly.
Virginia Attorney General Jason Miyares announced the creation of a new task force to monitor and combat anti-Semitism.
We want the left hand to know what the right hand is doing. So it's both monitoring, it's informing, and we have a civil rights division here in the AG's office, if need be, bringing cases as well. So I think that's a critical component, is bringing those both in the law enforcement, the security, the education background on one page. They can get a clear picture of the depths of the problem that we're seeing right now in Virginia, and we're obviously seeing this nationally as well.
A 2021 report by the Anti-Defamation League found that anti-Semitic incidents, including assaults, harassment, and vandalism, hit an all-time high. Virginia experienced a 70% increase in the hate crime.
I think we're still dealing with the aftershocks of what happened in Charlottesville in 2017, where you saw the anti-Semitic bigots walking through town, shouting anti-Semitic slurs. And I think, candidly, getting through COVID, we're at this inflection point in America where 50% of Americans don't even know the name of their neighbor.
Samuel Asher, executive director of the Virginia Holocaust Museum, sees ignorance as one of the main factors behind many incidents.
There was a study a couple of years ago by the Schoen Foundation, and it found that if you had been to a Holocaust museum, if you studied about the Holocaust, you were far less likely to be involved in hate groups, white supremacist groups, etc. They also found the reverse. If you had no understanding of the Holocaust, then you are possibly going to be recruited by white supremacists, KKK, etc.
Asher and his staff regularly bring in teachers from all over the state and provide tools to help them accurately teach students about Hitler's final solution aimed at eradicating the Jewish people. With education as a top priority of the new anti-Semitism task force, the museum will also be hosting members of Virginia law enforcement.
The best way to fight bad information is with good information. So a lot of it's educating. A lot of it's making sure our state police officers go and they spend the day when they're at the police academy going to the Holocaust Museum, because so many young police officers, they're just not familiar with it. And maybe that's an indictment on our history standards in our public schools.
A 50-state survey on Holocaust knowledge among millennials and Gen Z found that 63% didn't know the Holocaust led to the murder of 6 million Jews. 48% couldn't name a single concentration camp.
My family lost 75 members. They came from Plock, Poland, which is a little town outside of Warsaw, and they were sent to the camps. And they're not here now. So I can testify, they're not here. And they're not here because they were killed in the Germans' mechanized killing machine. And we cannot ever let that happen again.
Members of this task force are still being chosen, but Miyares tells me he's seeking a mix of public officials and private citizens. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Richmond, Virginia.
Coming up, the steps you can take to avoid getting one of the most dreaded diseases in the world, Alzheimer's. We're going to hear from a medical expert when we come back. Stay with us. Although science has yet to find a cure to Alzheimer's disease, scientists tell us at least we know now how people can prevent themselves from getting it. New research points to dozens of factors that can cause the disease. On this week's episode of The Healthy Living on the CBN News Channel, one Alzheimer's expert describes how to determine your own risk and how to minimize it.
For so long, a lot of people thought, there's nothing we can do about Alzheimer's. We don't know who it's going to strike or why or when. And so you just pray that you don't get it. But now the great news is we do know why people get Alzheimer's. And there's so much that we can do to prevent that happening to us and our loved ones.
Absolutely right. And I love what the Bible says in Galatians 6, 7, and 8. It says, "Be not deceived. God is not mocked. Whatsoever seed you sow, that shall you also reap." And again, unfortunately, so many people are sowing the wrong seeds, And one seed we have no choice in is if we have the Alzheimer's gene. And 1/4 of this population has the Alzheimer's gene. And unfortunately, those people are at a much higher risk. And so on anyone that has any memory loss, I encourage them to ask their doctors to check them for the Alzheimer's gene, the ApoE gene test, as well as the homocysteine level. But I have a battery of tests I check because what we find is if we don't check these major things, and if they have that Alzheimer's gene, that's like the switch that has already been flipped, and it's just a matter of time before they start to struggle. Their brain starts to struggle. And so it's critical that we get them help right away because there's key nutrients they need, and especially lowering that homocysteine level is so important.
So the ApoE gene, there's either ApoE3 or ApoE4, and you can have either ApoE4, both of them, ApoE3, both of them, or 1 and 1. And the ApoE4 is the one that we really wish that we wouldn't have. That's the real bad one. Yes, that's the one that, especially after age 50, when those hormones crash, that's when the symptoms come. But those people are usually protected up until age 50. And when the estrogen takes a nosedive and bottoms out at age 50 to 52 in women, or when the testosterone bottoms out in men, that's the protective factors, as well as DHEA, pregnenolone. Estradiol is very protective in women and also in men. But again, that's when it really affects. So that's why we have to know our status and then take advantage of the right diet. If you have it, you don't have to go down that road toward Alzheimer's. That's the important thing about it. We can literally prevent it with intermittent fasting, exercise, good, well-oxygenated sleep, but most important, the healthy keto diet. That is the key if you have the gene. Now, if you don't have the gene, you can do the healthy Mediterranean diet. But if you have the gene, I think intermittent fasting is one of the most powerful things we can do in order to prevent that gene from expressing itself. And we need to fast for about 16 hours a night, ideally. Ideally. And so I actually did, for the longest time, wasn't sure if I wanted to know whether I had the gene, because at the time I thought, well, I don't want to know I'm going to get Alzheimer's because there's nothing you can do about it. But actually the opposite is true. It's important to learn. And I took the 23andMe test, and it came back where I had one of the genes. So I have ApoE3 and ApoE4, which means my risk has elevated up to 30%. Right, 30%. And if you have both of them, it's more like into the 70s. So you're more likely than not.
Yes, you're right.
To get it.
It's really high. Correct.
And so when I got the 23andMe test, then I went to my doctor and had another genetic test, and that showed the same thing too. So this has been a lifesaver for me. I've been on this type of thing for a long time, and at first when I was told that intermittent fasting for 18 hours a day is ideal if you have one or both of the genes. And I was like, oh, 18 hours a day? That means I can only eat 6 hours a day. But actually, it hasn't been that bad.
It's not. As long as you can have tea with stevia or monk fruit in there, which is fine. You're still in the fasting zone, see? So it's great. So talk about why fasting is so good, especially for the brain and for prevention of Alzheimer's symptoms. Well, when you're fasting, especially when you go over that 14 hours, and ideal it's 16 to 18. You're right. If you have the double mutation, ApoE4/4. But what it does, number one, it lowers your insulin levels. It starts to reverse insulin resistance. Number two, it lowers inflammation. These are two root causes of Alzheimer's besides having the gene. And then really important, it starts to go, your brain undergoes a condition we call autophagy, where we start self-cleaning and we start to clear out beta amyloid, that plaque and tangles associated with Alzheimer's. So we start to clear that, as well as we boost this powerful hormone or growth factor called brain-derived neurotrophic factor when we're fasting.
And you can learn more about how you can prevent Alzheimer's disease tonight on Healthy Living. It begins at 8:30 Eastern. You can find it on the CBN News channel. You can also download the CBN News app, and you can watch it on YouTube as well. Still ahead, Jesus said, I was in prison and you came to visit me. We're going to hear from the head of a group called God Behind Bars that ministers to prison inmates and their families and helps prisoners re-enter society. We've got the story for you right after this. The nonprofit ministry God Behind Bars focuses on the physical, spiritual, and relational needs of inmates and their families. The ministry also works to help prisoners re-enter society. On this week's episode of The Prayer Link, Charlene Aaron spoke with God Behind Bars CEO Jake Bodine, who shared how it all began.
Tell us about God Behind Bars for those who may not be familiar with it and how it got started.
Yeah, well, we've been in a ministry since 2009. We started out of Las Vegas, Nevada. I've been in a ministry family my entire life. My father leads a large church in Las Vegas. And as I was in college, I felt a calling and a prompting on my life to reach those that were in prison. I had a couple of friends that had struggled along the way and were looking at prison time. And so God had just kind of used that as a burning or to start a burning passion in my heart to really reach the least of these. And we tried to utilize technology to help the church, specifically the local church across the U.S., begin having effective prison ministry behind the walls. And so we do that by partnering with the local church and helping them start a satellite campus, if you will, within a prison to where they have the opportunity to reach hundreds of inmates on a weekly basis, get them involved in their church family, the hopes and desires of getting their family members involved in their church family before their loved one is ever released from incarceration, and then kind of bridging that gap between incarceration and freedom as they step back into society with a new beginning and a church family to call home.
That is absolutely amazing how you're using technology to connect. That is super amazing, and that churches can take part in that. I love this post that I recently read on your Instagram that says, God is bringing revival to prison. I understand that many people are coming to Christ through this ministry. Talk about what's God's doing inside the prison walls.
Yeah, it's been absolutely amazing. Specifically, since COVID, we launched a new form of technology, the first ever third-party app behind prison walls, which is basically a Netflix, if you will, of faith-based content that allows inmates and their family members to engage with the local church on a 24/7 basis. They have access to sermons, worship music, devotionals, guided prayers, anything that somebody may need in their spiritual life. They have access through a tablet within their cell 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so we've seen a tremendous amount of decisions for Christ over the course of the last 2 years. In fact, there were up over 100,000 that have said yes to Jesus. And so it's absolutely amazing. And those are real people clicking a button. They can only click it one time. So they are really accepting to follow Jesus behind prison walls, and they're engaging with the spiritual content on a daily basis. In fact, we have somewhere over 14 million hours watched on the app already, which is absolutely remarkable when it comes to technological data. So
praise God. I love the fact that NFL quarterback Russell Wilson and his wife Sierra recently took part in a God Behind ministry outreach, and others like Maverick City, Kirk Franklin have also been involved. What's that been like for the inmates, and what's the impact that we're seeing with that?
Yeah, it actually gives them something to hold on to, something to look forward to, a hope that there's people out there who are remembering them in their situation, that are able to come in and share their testimonies, their giftings, their talents, and find them to be worth their time. And so I can tell you right now what that does in the life of an individual is life-changing. It's something that will forever mark them. We've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of people give their life to Christ during those events, and someone using their platform to ultimately fulfill their purpose and point it towards the glory of God.
Praise God. And Mr. Bodine, we've also seen those wonderful, amazing videos, those joy-filled family reunions at prisons. What is the process for reconnecting children with their incarcerated parents and for helping inmates re-enter society?
Yeah, that's one of my most favorite things that we do as an organization. As a father of 5 children, I know what it would mean to me spending any time away from them, let alone some of these individuals' years. And for some of these men or women, meeting their children for the very first time. And so our team takes it serious. It's not just about the focus of an individual who's incarcerated, but their literally legacy that they're going to leave behind them. We want to amplify their role as a spiritual guide in their child's life.
And you can see the full interview of God Behind Bars Ministry on this week's episode of The Prayer Link. Plus, you can see an inspiring testimony from singer and songwriter Anthony Evans, who dealt with depression. You can find that on this week's episode of The Prayer Link on the CBN News Channel this Wednesday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can also find it on the CBN News app or on YouTube. Coming up, a strong opening at the box office for a new film based on one of the most famous stories in the Bible. And I had an opportunity to get up close and personal with the movie's cast and director. We'll bring you that story when we come back. Stay with us. One of the most famous stories in the Bible is scoring high on the silver screen. The new movie, His Only Son, finished third at the box office opening weekend, earning $5.5 million. The original biblical drama follows one of the most heart-wrenching passages of Scripture, God asking Abraham to sacrifice his only son. This is the first original theatrical release from Angel Studios, which also produces the wildly popular Bible series, The Chosen, the most successful faith-based crowdfunded show of all time. Viewers are calling His Only Son biblically accurate and authentic. I traveled to Utah for the film's red carpet premiere and had the opportunity to speak with the film's director and its stars. We'll be sharing more on that right here on CBN NewsWatch Studio 5 and on the 700 Club. Time now for your Tuesday Tweetable. This is a message I pray blesses you, and you will then bless others by posting, tagging, and tweeting it to those who follow you. Don't chase money. Don't chase paper. Remember that. Don't do that. Remember, paper without purpose is pointless. With that word, make this a terrific Tuesday, and be sure to have yourself a wonderful week. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our programs on the CBN News Channel. You can find them there at any time, as well as online at cbnnews.com. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.